Hey everyone, it's the Haunting Hour here. Before we jump into today's video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoy the content. And if you have any thoughts on the stories in this video, feel free to drop them in the comments below. I always love hearing your feedback. Now, let's get into the terrifying stories. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope you all have an awesome day. It's taken me 2 years to talk about what happened out there. I used to think it would fade, that time would sand it down like wind over stone. But it didn't. The fear stayed, it just took on different shapes. Sometimes it comes in dreams, sometimes in flashes when I hear running water. It's changed everything. How I live, how I sleep, how I look at my own son. This started in early August, around 6 p.m. It was hot, the air thick and still, like the trees were holding their breath. We were camping for the weekend. Me, my wife Erin, our daughter Rachel, and our son Mason. Just a short trip before school started again. Erin found the campground online. It was 3 hours from home, tucked in a steep forest with trails, a small lake, and a narrow river that curled around the campground like a spine. I'm not an outdoors guy, but it sounded peaceful. Erin wanted to unplug, give the kids one last memory before fall. And the kids were excited. Rachel was 9, full of questions. Mason was 6, restless, always running ahead. We spent the first night roasting hot dogs and telling stories by the fire. It was quiet, normal. For a while it felt good. But the next morning, something felt different. I woke up around 7 a.m. to the sound of birds, only they weren't singing, just rustling in the trees. The forest seemed still, too still. No wind, no buzz of insects. Erin noticed too. She glanced around while pouring coffee and said, "Doesn't it feel off?" I shrugged it off at first. Maybe it was just the weather. We headed out for a trail hike around 9 a.m. The kids led the way, Rachel walking like she was in a movie, and Mason poking everything with a stick. The path sloped gently down toward the river. It narrowed the closer we got, roots twisting up through the dirt, patches of mud where the rain had collected. Mason was walking close to the riverbank, teasing us by pretending to fall in. Erin warned him twice. The third time he slipped. He didn't scream, just gone. One moment there, the next a splash and nothing. The river was dark, not wide, but something about it seemed deeper than it should have been. I didn't think. I jumped in after him. The current was strong, stronger than it looked. The water was thick, like it was trying to pull me under. I couldn't see anything, just blackness. I tried to swim down, tried to feel for him, but the pressure around me grew. I couldn't even tell which way was up. I felt something wrap around my ankle, and then nothing. When I came to, I was lying on the riverbank, drawing mud on my hands, head spinning. I sat up slowly, shaky, trying to remember where I was. I looked around and saw Erin. She was at the edge of the water, kneeling over Mason, who was curled up in a towel. Rachel stood a few feet away, white-faced, holding her arm. I ran to them. "Is he okay?" Erin looked up. Her eyes were wide, wet. She whispered. He swam to the surface, by himself. I looked down at Mason. He was soaked, shivering, but no cuts, no bruises. He didn't even look tired, just still. I reached out to touch his arm. Erin shouted, "No." She swatted my hand away and held up her own. Red welts spread across her palms, angry and blistering. "I tried to hold him," she said. "It burns." I didn't understand. I touched him again, just a brush against his arm, and my hand jerked back. It felt like grabbing a stove burner. No wound, just this deep, stinging heat spreading up my fingers. We wrapped Mason in a blanket and walked back to the site. He didn't say a word. His eyes stared ahead, unblinking. His skin felt damp no matter how much we dried him. The towel stuck to him like he'd just come out of the water. By noon, we decided to leave. I told Erin I'd head to the ranger station to check out. She stayed to pack. The ranger station was empty. A paper note taped to the door read, "Back later, gone up trail." I waited a few minutes, then left. When I got back to our site, everything looked the same. Tent still up, bags neatly packed, except Erin was screaming. Rachel was gone. Mason was sitting on a log near the fire pit, staring into the woods. Erin was running in circles, yelling her daughter's name. When she saw me, she said, I turned around for 1 second. She was right here. I ran toward Mason. "Did you see where she went?" He smiled. a slow, tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. We found Rachel 20 minutes later, standing at the edge of the river. Her shoes were off, feet in the mud. She looked over her shoulder and said, "I heard myself calling." From the trees. We brought her back to camp. She didn't seem scared, just confused. She drew a picture in her notebook later. 2 versions of her standing by the river. One smiling, one drowning. That night, we stayed in a motel near the highway. We couldn't sleep in that tent anymore. Rachel stayed huddled against Aaron. I sat on the bed opposite Mason, who watched cartoons with the sound muted, still soaked, still shivering. Around 2 a.m., Aaron woke me up whispering, "He's not sleeping. He hasn't blinked." I looked over. Mason's eyes were open, staring straight at the ceiling. Unblinking, his chest rose and fell in a slow, even pattern. I moved closer with the lamp. He turned his head and smiled at me. That's when I saw it, his eyes. They weren't brown anymore. They were black, solid black, like the river. We went home early the next morning. None of us spoke on the drive. The next few days felt normal, but only on the surface. Mason ate his cereal, went to bed on time, said nothing. But he never asked to be held, never hugged us. And when we tried to touch him, even with cloth, the burn came back. We started using gloves. At first latex, then heavier ones. Still, the skin underneath would tingle and peel after touching him. Doctors couldn't explain it. Blood work, MRI, all clear. Somatic response, they said. Probably psychological, but we knew better. A week later, Rachel got sick. It started with a fever, then rashes, then night terrors. She said Mason stood at the foot of her bed whispering to her in her own voice. "He said the river misses me," she said. "He says I should come back." She started drawing strange images. The river, a black figure with white eyes, herself with no mouth. We put her in a children's hospital. Doctors said it might be stress. We knew it wasn't. Around that time, Erin tried one last time to reach Mason. One night at 8 p.m., she sat next to him on the floor and started humming his old favorite song, a lullaby she used to sing when he had nightmares. He turned to her and hummed it back, perfectly, but in her voice. She got up and walked out of the room. She didn't speak for 2 hours. Then she packed a bag. "I'm taking Rachel," she said. "You can stay with that thing if you want." And then she left. Now it's just me and him. I don't speak to him much. He doesn't need me to. He stands in the hallway at night staring out the window. Sometimes at 3 a.m., I see wet footprints in the kitchen, trailing from the door to his room. One morning, around 7 a.m., a local deputy came by. They found a body downriver, swollen, face gone. Clothes matched mine, right down to the patch on the jacket. They asked if I knew who it could be. I said no. I didn't know how to tell them it might be me, or a version of me. And I'm starting to think the boy that came back isn't Mason. A few days ago, I found a dead bird on the porch, wet, drowned. No rain in days. Mason stood behind me. "It's starting," he said. I asked what he meant. He just turned and walked away, leaving damp footprints on the wood. Last night, I heard a knock at the front door. I opened it. No one was there, just a single line of water dripping from the door frame. I think the river is coming back for us. And when it does, Mason won't be here, but something else will. It was around 10 p.m. when I finally sat down to relax. That Friday had dragged like wet laundry. The office was short-staffed, traffic was a mess, and the thunderstorm rolling in had darkened the sky hours before sunset. By the time I got home, the power had already flickered twice, and I wasn't sure how long I'd have electricity. So I skipped dinner, changed into sweatpants, poured a glass of red wine, and flipped through streaming apps, looking for something easy to watch. Nothing seemed to catch. It was that weird middle ground where you want to watch something, but you don't want to commit. I landed on this film I didn't remember adding. No poster, just a gray thumbnail with the word recollection across it. That was it. No summary, no rating. I figured it was an RT drama or something experimental. I like indie films, and I assumed the app had recommended it based on something else I'd watched. I hit play. The movie started quiet, just static at first. Then a low hum and the flicker of light, like an old camcorder turning on. The first shot was of a house. Not a famous house. Not one of those Victorian haunted mansions or rundown farmhouses they always use in horror movies. Just a small, gray, two-story home with cracked siding and a plastic lawn chair tipped over on the porch. The camera didn't move. It just held the house in frame for what felt like a full minute. I sat back and took a sip of wine. The house felt weirdly familiar. Then the screen cut to black and a voice came in. Not narration, not dialogue, just breathing. Shallow, close to the mic. It sounded like someone trying to stay quiet while hiding. I felt my stomach tighten, but I told myself it was part of the experience. I'd seen films like this before. Slow burn, psychological, abstract. The next shot was inside a bedroom. It was a modest space. Light blue walls, white ceiling fan, wooden dresser. The angle was a little tilted, as if someone had set a camera on a bookshelf. The lighting was natural, soft, like morning light coming through blinds. I stared. The comforter on the bed was gray with navy stripes. The rug had a pattern of faded diamonds. I leaned forward. Those were the exact same sheets I had on my bed upstairs. The rug matched too. I paused the movie and sat there for a moment. It was probably a coincidence. That kind of thing happens. I even remembered buying those sheets from a generic online store. Nothing special. I hit play again. The next scene was in a hallway. Beige carpet, one picture frame on the wall. I didn't blink this time. That was my hallway, not similar, exact. I muted the TV and listened. The house was quiet, except for the soft ticking of the kitchen clock. I hadn't heard thunder in a while, but the air felt heavy, like rain was still hanging around. I got up, walked down the real hallway, and stood in front of the same picture frame shown on the screen. I turned and looked toward the living room. I could still see the movie playing. On the screen, the angle had changed. It now showed a woman walking toward the hallway. The back of her head, brown hair tied in a low bun, black hoodie, gray sweatpants. It was me. I didn't move. I stood there, heart starting to race, as the woman on screen stepped into the hallway. Her posture, her walk, even the way she brushed her fingers along the wall. It was all exactly how I moved. I slowly walked back into the living room. When I sat down, the woman on screen sat down at the same time. She was now facing the camera. I saw my own face staring back at me. I paused the movie again. The still frame showed me. Same tired eyes, same faint freckle under my right cheekbone. I looked like I did that exact night, down to the ponytail and wine glass in hand. I didn't know what to do. I grabbed the remote and skipped forward 10 seconds. The woman blinked. I skipped forward again. She looked up, skipped again. She turned her head and looked directly at the camera. No expression, just an empty, steady stare. I backed out of the movie completely, returned to the main menu, but the movie was still there. Recollection, still no summary, still no artwork. I checked my watch. It was 11 p.m. I got up to unplug the TV, but just before I reached the cord, I heard something. My voice, from the speakers. I think I've seen this before. I froze. The movie had started again, on its own. The screen now showed the kitchen. My kitchen. Dishes in the sink. Half a banana on the counter. The same banana I had eaten half of that morning. I turned off the TV, not paused, not backed out. I held the remote and clicked the power button until the screen went black. Then I unplugged it. I stood in silence. No hum from the screen, no voices, just the sound of my own breath and the soft ticking from the kitchen. I poured the rest of the wine down the sink and tried to sleep upstairs. I didn't make it past the bedroom doorway. My bed was already turned down. The lights were dimmed. The bathroom door was slightly open, like I'd been in the middle of something, but I hadn't come up all night. The next morning, I checked the streaming app. The movie was gone. I searched the title, nothing. I looked in my history, empty, like I hadn't watched anything at all. I screenshotted the gray thumbnail the night before, just in case, but when I opened my photo gallery, the screenshot was gone. In its place was a single, low-res image, my face staring at the screen, taken from just a few feet away. I dropped my phone. From then on, things got strange in slow, careful ways. My reflection lagged in the bathroom mirror, just slightly, maybe half a second behind. The voice assistant on my phone answered questions I didn't ask. I would glance down to see it searching things like, can dead people dream? Or, how long does the brain stay active after death? At first, I thought I was sleepwalking. Maybe I had a neurological condition. I booked a medical exam. All clean. No brain tumors. No sleep disorders. They suggested stress. I tried to ignore it, but the house wouldn't let me. Every night, around 11 p.m., the TV would power on. I would hear breathing from the living room, even though I unplugged the set every morning. The film played again, but it was never the same. Sometimes it showed me as I was, sitting on the couch. Other times, it showed me walking up the stairs. Once, it showed me in bed, sleeping. Each time I unplugged the TV, it turned back on a few hours later. I stopped sleeping. Then, one night around 2 a.m., I woke up sitting on the couch. I don't remember getting there. The TV was on. The movie was halfway through. The woman on screen sat on the couch, just like me. Same clothes, same hair. But something had changed. This time, she wasn't alone. A figure stood in the background, just behind her, tall, pale, watching. I spun around. Nothing was there. The figure never moved. It just stayed in the corner of the screen, like it didn't want to be noticed. But every time the movie came back, it was closer. By the sixth time, it stood over the woman's shoulder. When I paused the movie, the screen froze, but the figure blinked. I ran out of the house that night. Stayed in a motel. The motel's TV didn't work. Snowy static. I didn't care. I just wanted rest. When I came home the next morning, my front door was unlocked. Nothing was missing. Nothing was moved. Except the TV. It was still on. The woman on screen was standing in the backyard. My backyard. And she was holding a shovel. I closed the app, shut off the power from the circuit breaker. That was 3 weeks ago. Since then, I've tried living normally. I see coworkers. I run errands. I even went on a date. But I feel wrong, like I'm copying someone else's life. Then last night, I went through some old photo albums to distract myself. I found one from a family trip to the coast. Me, my parents, a few cousins. Only I wasn't in any of the pictures. They all acted like I took them. But I remembered posing for a few. I remembered laughing. The couch cushion where I sleep still has a dent in it, but I don't remember lying down. The fridge restocks the things I don't remember buying. Today I got an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a photo, printed on glossy paper. It showed a woman sitting in a theater, empty rows around her. The screen in front of her showed the same woman watching herself. On the back of the photo were 4 words, "You are still watching." It's 9 p.m. now. The TV has been off all day, but the screen just lit up. No noise, just the static glow, and a paused image of me typing this. It's been almost 5 years since I stepped foot inside that house, and I still can't sleep through the night. Not without checking the locks twice. Not without waking up at 3 a.m. with the sheets stuck to my back, listening for sounds I know shouldn't be there. My name is David, and I was a real estate agent when this happened. Not a paranormal investigator, not a ghost enthusiast, not somebody out looking for trouble. I sold homes for a living. Regular homes to regular people. Sometimes a nice one, sometimes a fixer-upper. Mostly long drives, meetings, and follow-up emails. Then I got the listing for Larkspur Drive. I remember the exact time I got the call, 8 a.m. on a Tuesday. My boss left a voicemail telling me we'd picked up a property on the edge of the county in a small neighborhood called Gray Ridge. I hadn't heard of it. The listing just said motivated seller and that the house was paid off. That usually meant a quick turnaround, no bank involvement, easy paperwork. The address was 41 Larkspur Drive. I looked it up online. The satellite view was strange. The image was blurry and out of date, and the house seemed tilted on its lot. The roof looked like it sloped unevenly, and the tree line around it was darker than the neighboring yards. I figured it was just a bad picture. I drove out to the property that afternoon, around 2 p.m. The sky was cloudy, but bright, the kind of light that makes everything look flat. The neighborhood was silent. No children, no dogs, no cars pulling into driveways. The street had a perfect, almost unreal cleanliness to it. Not a single piece of trash, no overgrown weeds, just unmoving houses sitting in a strange stillness. An old man at the gas station had asked me where I was headed earlier. When I said Larkspur Drive, he just handed me my change without saying a word. Not rude, just quiet, like I'd said something that made him uncomfortable. The house itself was a modest one-story place with faded green siding, a slouched roof, and a crooked metal mailbox. The yard was overgrown but not wild, like it had been mowed a few weeks ago and then forgotten. A black sedan was parked in the driveway. The tires looked fine, but the windows were dusty. I thought it might belong to a neighbor or a caretaker. I used the lockbox key and opened the front door. It swung open with ease, too easily. There was no squeak or resistance, no dragging on the frame. I actually stumbled a little as I entered. It was like the house was letting me in. I paused in the foyer. The air inside felt strange, not just stuffy, but heavy, like the humidity was sitting on my shoulders. The scent wasn't rot or mold, but something flatter, like plastic that's been sealed up too long. The layout was plain. Small living room to the left, kitchen behind that, 2 bedrooms and a bathroom down a short hall. The carpet was worn but clean. Walls had patchy floral wallpaper in places, and flaking white paint in others. I snapped some photos, took a few notes on my phone, but then I noticed something. The outlets were all sealed, not covered with plates, filled in. It looked like someone had poured putty or concrete into every single socket. The air vents were stuffed with cloth and paper. The light switches did nothing. I tried the kitchen faucet. It gave 1 burp of water, then went dry. That's when I started to feel uneasy. It wasn't the condition of the place. It was the way it felt, like someone had gutted the house of function but left it standing just for show. In the hallway, between the 2 bedrooms, I found a narrow door, shorter than normal. No knob, just a small metal loop hanging from a hook. I opened it. Behind it was a set of stairs leading straight down. I turned on my phone's flashlight and descended. The basement, if you could call it that, wasn't what I expected. It was a concrete chamber, square, maybe 10 feet wide. No pipes, no support beams, no windows. The walls were smooth and dry. The floor, damp but not flooded. There wasn't a single object in the room. I stepped inside and swept the light around. Then the door behind me shut, not slowly, slammed. I jumped back and ran to it, grabbing the loop. It wouldn't move. The hook on the outside had snapped back into place. I stared at the darkness behind me. I heard a sound, not a creak or a drip. Breathing, deep, calm, rhythmic. I turned and shined my light, but the room was empty. I don't know how long I stood there. Maybe a minute, maybe 10. I slammed my shoulder into the door until the old hook snapped loose. It flew open, and I scrambled back into the hallway without looking back. I took one last picture of the basement door and left without locking up. I told myself I wouldn't return, but my boss called the next day, said the seller had emailed him. The man lived in Oregon, claimed he hadn't been back to the house in over a decade. He said he was surprised we'd taken the listing. Apparently, the house had changed hands 5 times in 15 years. Every single buyer had died within 6 months, some in fires, some in freak accidents. One man drowned in a creek miles from the house. Another fell from a balcony. The police ruled them all accidental, except for one. A man named Charles Dunleavy bought the house in 2009. He was found dead in the basement 2 months later. Autopsy showed no trauma, no strangulation, no poison. He just died, eyes open, arms at his sides. I told my boss I wanted to drop the listing. He said we couldn't. Legally, we were locked in. He offered to handle it himself, but I said no. Maybe I didn't want to look scared. Maybe I thought I could prove something. I went back to the house on Friday at 3 p.m. This time I brought a crowbar, gloves, a flashlight, and a mask in case there was mold. The moment I stepped inside, I felt it again. The air had a weight to it, like a room just after a fight, when everyone's left, but the feeling hasn't. I went through the bedrooms. One closet was empty. The other had scratch marks inside, long, deep grooves in the drywall, like someone had clawed at it from the inside. I leaned in and saw a symbol. 3 interlocking circles, carved into the wall, almost delicately. As I stepped back, I heard footsteps above me. I stopped cold. There was no second floor. I stared at the ceiling. No attic door, no crawl space, nothing. But footsteps continued, slow, even, like someone walking barefoot across a hardwood floor. I didn't move until they stopped. I left the house immediately. I didn't even lock the door. 3 days later, I got a call from a couple, Mark and Lena Summers. They said they'd seen a listing and wanted a tour. I hadn't posted the listing yet. I asked where they found it. They said they got an email from our agency. I checked our system. No record of any email being sent. They were persistent. They said they had driven by and loved the exterior. I reluctantly agreed to meet them at the house at 9 a.m. the next morning. I planned to warn them, maybe even exaggerate a little to scare them off. They never showed. I called. No response. By 2 p.m., I drove out to the property. The black sedan was still in the driveway. I walked up and looked inside. Empty. Just a pair of sunglasses in the cup holder. I knocked. No answer. Then I noticed the porch light was on. The power hadn't worked last time I was there. I left and didn't come back. 2 days later, I found an article buried online. Mark and Lena Summers had been found dead at a rest stop outside Grey Ridge, still seated in their car. Engine off. No signs of struggle. The GPS log showed their last stop was 41 Larkspur Drive. That night, I couldn't sleep. I dreamed I was back in the basement. Only this time, it was bigger. The walls were farther away. The air was thicker. I heard breathing and something behind me. I never turned to see it. I woke up sweating and moved out of my apartment a week later. I got a job in another city. Clean slate, new name tag, new clients. I told myself it was over, but then the mail started. No return address, envelopes with photos, the house, the hallway, the basement door. One envelope had a photo of me standing at the top of the stairs, flashlight in hand. I never took that photo. The power in my new apartment flickers sometimes, just for a second. My hallway feels longer than it did before. I live on the second floor, but sometimes I hear footsteps above me, and I don't have a neighbor up there. Sometimes I sit in the dark and listen, the way I used to when I was a kid. Back then, I was afraid of things under the bed. Now I'm afraid of doors that shut on their own. I think the house isn't just a place. I think it's a thing, a living thing, not in the way we understand life. It doesn't need food or light or even walls. I think it was a house once, but it's changing. I think it tries people on like clothes. I think it learns to fit in. I haven't heard from my old agency in months. I called the number last week, disconnected. I looked up 41 Larkspur Drive. The listing was gone. Street View says there's no house there anymore. But I got an email this morning from a realtor in the city next door. He said a new property just came on the market. The photo in the email showed a house I didn't recognize, but the window looked familiar. And the house was already letting people in. I never thought I'd live this long. 86 years. It's more than most of my friends got. My knees ache. My memory slips sometimes, and I forget where I put things. But I'm still here. Still waking up every day to the sound of birds in the backyard. Still brewing my tea and checking the weather through the same old window. I live alone now, in a small house just outside of Ashbrook, a rural town that's mostly quiet these days. My husband passed 10 years ago, and our 2 sons live states away. They call often enough, send me pictures of the grandkids. I keep those on the fridge, clipped in place with a ladybug magnet. I'm not much for adventure anymore, but I still garden. Nothing big, just a patch of herbs and some tomatoes. The dirt calms me, gives me purpose, makes me feel like I'm still a part of something alive. What I'm going to tell you happened earlier this spring. It was a Tuesday afternoon, around 1 p.m., cloudy and cool. I had planned to replant some lavender by the back fence. The rain from earlier that week had made the ground soft, perfect for digging. I brought out my gloves, my stool, and my hand spade. I dug 2 holes without any trouble, but when I started on the 3rd, near the old oak tree, I hit something solid. I thought it was a rock, but as I cleared the dirt, I saw a metal corner. It was part of a square iron chest, old, rusted, and heavy. It took me a while to work it out of the ground. The thing was dense and cold to the touch, even though it had been in the sun. I set it on the edge of the porch and opened it. Inside was a stack of photographs, black and white, faded and curled around the corners. There was a smell that hit me, not mildew, but something thick and sour, like metal left too long in a well. I picked one up. A woman stood in front of a wooden barn, hands at her sides, dressed to her ankles. She stared blankly at the camera. Her left eye was missing. I don't mean she wore a patch. I mean the space where her eye should have been was flattened, gone, like someone had wiped it off the paper. I looked through the others. Every single person, men, women, children, was missing their left eye. No signs of damage, no tears in the paper, just smoothness where an eye should be. I brought the chest inside and laid the photos out on the kitchen table. I spent hours looking at them, turning them over, searching for names or dates. Most had nothing. A few had notes written in pencil, too faint to read. Some of the faces looked familiar, not in a way I could place exactly, but they stirred something. A memory of a photo my mother used to keep, maybe. One of the men looked like my great-grandfather. Same jawline, same slightly crooked ears. That night, around 3 a.m., I woke up and went to the kitchen for a glass of water. The photos had moved. I had left them in stacks. Now they were spread out in a line, running down the center of the table, like a path. At the end of the line was a new photo. It was of my house, taken from the yard, facing the kitchen window. The left edge of the window frame was darkened. Not a shadow, more like a smudge burned into the image. I looked out the window, into the backyard, nothing there. I closed the curtains, put the photos back into the box, and shoved it under the sink. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. The next day, I called the local library. I spoke to a woman named Nora, a kind lady who had helped me find family documents years ago. I asked if she could help trace land records or photography studios that used to be in the area. I didn't tell her why. When I came in around 1 p.m., she had a file ready. Most of it was boring, tax forms, ownership records. But one name stood out, Elias Danning. The land my house sits on used to belong to him. He ran a photography studio near the center of Ashbrook in the early 1900s. He went bankrupt in 1911. After that, he vanished. The records mentioned an investigation into his studio. Something about strange complaints, but nothing was conclusive. The property was marked for demolition shortly after. The last line on the record said, "No remains found." I asked Nora if there were any photos of him. She looked but came up empty. A name Danning stuck with me. I remembered my grandmother talking about a man with that name. She said he took something from our family. I thought she was just being dramatic. I didn't realize she meant it literally. That night, around 9 p.m., I opened the chest again. There were more photos inside now, and I knew the faces. My father, my mother, my husband, all missing their left eyes. I picked up the next photo and felt my hand tremble. It was me, standing in my kitchen, turned slightly, wearing the same sweater I had put on that morning. My left eye was gone. I dropped the photo and stumbled back. My head spun. I grabbed the table to steady myself. It took a while to calm my breathing. When I looked up, I caught something outside the kitchen window. A shape, tall, still, like a man standing just out of reach. I turned on the porch light. No one was there. No footprints, no movement, just silence. The next morning, I felt something strange in my left eye. Not pain, a tightness. The skin around it felt cold, like I had been out in the wind too long. I looked in the mirror. The pupil was off-center, like it wasn't focused. The whites were slightly gray. I went to the clinic at 11 a.m. The doctor examined me, said everything looked normal. Maybe I was just tired. He told me to rest. I tried. But that night, around 8 p.m., there was a knock at the back door. 3 short taps. I didn't move. Then it came again. I slowly pulled back the curtain. No one there. But a photo was lying on the doormat. It showed the hallway outside my bedroom. The perspective was low, as if someone had taken it from the floor. I closed the door and locked it. Then I called my son. I told him everything, about the chest, the photos, the name Danny. He listened. He said he'd come up in the morning. I never saw him. The next day, I waited. By noon, he hadn't arrived. I called him, straight to voicemail. I checked the driveway. Nothing. I told myself I must have misunderstood. Maybe he said Friday instead of Thursday. But in my heart, I knew better. I called the police. They took a report, but didn't seem concerned. One of them asked if I was feeling stressed lately. That evening, I took the chest out into the woods. I buried it under a tree. 3 feet down, packed the earth tight, stomped it flat. The next morning, the chest was on my kitchen table, dry, clean, exactly where it had been before. A new photo sat on top. My son, sitting in his car, turned slightly, looking behind him. The image had that slight grit of recent film. His left eye was gone. I stared at the photo for a long time. My hands shook. I didn't cry. I just felt empty, like something had been cut out of me. My own eye felt worse. The pupil didn't move with the other anymore. It was like looking through frosted glass. The next time I walked past the microwave, I caught a reflection. There was someone standing behind me, a man. Tall, thin, worn black clothing. His eyes were dark, too deep to see into. I whirled around. No one there, but the image stuck with me. That was Elias Danning. I don't know how I know that, but I do. And he didn't look old. He looked like something trying to remember how to be human. Like a costume that hadn't been tailored quite right. I haven't left the house in days. Sometimes, I hear the front door open and close on its own. I wake up and find pictures of strangers on my floor. At first, I tried to fight it. Now, I just let it happen. The camera sits on my kitchen counter. I don't remember buying it, but it feels familiar, like it belongs to me. It fits my hands perfectly. I took a photo of the mailman yesterday. He waved at me as he walked away. I took another of the grocery woman who comes on Saturdays. Their eyes are fine, for now, but not for long. The collection grows, and I think I understand now. This isn't a curse, it's a job. One Danning started, and one I meant to continue. I don't know as people can see the future. I've heard stories, people dreaming about accidents before they happen, thinking of someone just before the phone rings. Sometimes it feels like coincidence, but other times it feels like something else. After what happened to my little brother, I'm not sure it's just coincidence anymore. This started about 10 years ago, back when I was 17. My little brother, Liam, had just turned 11. We lived with our mom in a small neighborhood on the outskirts of a town called Elmridge. Quiet place. The streets had names like Redwood Circle and Tanner Court. Nothing really happened there. People kept their lawns clean, parked their cars in the garage, and went to bed early. That fall, the weather turned fast. September was warm and bright. Then out of nowhere, October came in gray and wet. The trees started dropping their leaves like they couldn't hold them anymore. The streetlights flickered more often, and the whole neighborhood took on this dull, muted feeling, like everything was just a little too quiet. The dreams started around then. It was a Wednesday morning. I remember because I had just gotten my license and was supposed to drive Liam to school. He came downstairs in his pajamas, looking pale and still. Our mom was making his lunch, but he just sat there at the table, staring out the window. When she asked what was wrong, he said, "I had a bad dream." She didn't press him. Kids have nightmares. But there was something in his voice, not panic, not whining, just a quiet kind of fear, like he'd seen something he couldn't describe. I asked what the dream was about. He looked at me, then back at the window, and said, "Everything broke. The sky, the ground, people too." That was all he said. He didn't explain, just sat there, still and small, while the wind bent the branches outside. He stayed quiet the whole ride to school. Over the next few days, he started changing. He stopped watching cartoons, stopped playing video games. He didn't want to go outside. He didn't want to talk. He started rubbing the back of his neck like something itched under the skin. Some nights I'd wake up and find him standing in the dark hallway, just staring into the kitchen. He wouldn't say anything until I walked him back to bed. One night, around 3 a.m., I found him sitting on the floor in the laundry room, mumbling to himself. His voice was calm, but low, like he was repeating a prayer only he knew. He said, "It's getting closer. We don't have time." I told Mom the next day. She thought it was just a phase, said he was growing up, maybe feeling anxious about school, but I could tell it was something else. Liam wasn't just moody. He was scared, really scared, like something was chasing him and getting closer every night. A week later, I found him drawing on the back of a cereal box. It was early, around 8 a.m. He'd filled the whole thing with heavy lines, dark loops, and at the center was a circle with little stick figures falling into it. Above it, he'd written, The sky will open, but it won't stop. I asked what that meant. He said, "You'll see." I brought the drawing to school that day. I showed it to my English teacher, who passed it to the school counselor. Mom got a call and took Liam to a therapist the next afternoon. The doctor said it could be stress, maybe something he wasn't ready to talk about. She gave him a prescription for sleeping pills and told us to make sure he wasn't left alone too long. That night, a storm hit. It started around 6 p.m., just a steady wind and light rain at first. But by 7 p.m., the wind turned violent, shaking, deciding, snapping tree branches in the dark. The power flickered. The air felt thick, oppressive. I was in the living room with Mom. William was upstairs. At 8 p.m., we heard a thud on the roof. Not thunder, not a tree limb, just a flat, heavy impact, like someone dropped a sandbag on the shingles. Another thump followed, then a third, then silence. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped out onto the porch. I shined it across the lawn. Something fell from above, a shadow, maybe a foot long. It hit the ground with a sick sound. Then another, and another. I stepped forward into the rain. The yard was covered in dead birds. Blackbirds, robins, sparrows, all of them lying on the ground, wings folded or spread, eyes open, bodies still. Some were broken, others looked perfectly intact, like they just dropped dead in the air and fell straight down. A neighbor came out, saw the yard and dropped to his knees. Another woman walked into the street in her bathrobe, holding a towel, like she could cover one of the birds and make it okay. No one talked. No one moved much. It felt like a funeral no one had prepared for. Then I heard Liam scream. I ran back inside, bolted upstairs, and found him huddled in the corner of his room, hands over his ears, rocking. He was whispering, "It's happening. I told you, it's happening." The next morning, the front yard was full of people. Neighbors, news crews, scientists. Someone said it was a pressure fluctuation caused by lightning, something about their navigation getting disrupted. No one had a real answer. Mom kept Liam home from school that day. I sat with him while he picked at his cereal. At 3 p.m. he turned to me and said, "They didn't fall because of the storm. They fell because they were trying to run." I asked, "Run from what?" He pointed upward. That night he woke me around 2 a.m. and said, "I need to show you." He led me to the basement door. I didn't want to go down there. Our basement was unfinished. Just concrete, old boxes, and a single bulb that flickered when it got too cold. He walked down first. I followed with the flashlight. He stood in the middle of the floor and pointed to the far wall. "It's behind there," he said. "It's not ready yet, but it's close." I looked. Just concrete. I asked what he meant. He said, "You still don't hear it, do you?" And then he went back to bed. The next day, he stopped talking entirely. Nothing. We took him back to the therapist, who admitted him to a pediatric psych ward for observation. They called it a dissociative episode. He stayed there for 6 months. They said he made some progress. He could draw, follow simple instructions, but he never spoke again. On his 12th birthday, they allowed him a weekend visit. He didn't smile. He didn't speak. He just walked to his room, closed the door, and sat on the bed. That night, at 3 a.m., another storm hit. This time, it wasn't birds, it was worms. Hundreds of them, surfacing from the wet lawn, crawling out onto the sidewalk, up the porch, down the driveway. And they were all dead, dried out, still, like something had sucked the life out of the ground before sending them up. Liam walked down to the basement that night. We found him the next morning. He was sitting cross-legged in the middle of the floor, staring at the wall. Didn't blink, didn't move, just breathed, slow, rhythmic. He stayed that way for 2 days. The doctors called it catatonia. They took him back Monday morning. He never came home again. Every few months, they send us his drawings. Black ink scratched into paper, like he's trying to etch through it. Almost always the same. Circles, long cracks, shapes falling into darkness. One of them shows a sky split in half, with something gray and dripping behind it. I've seen it in my dreams too, once or twice. I moved out of the house last year. I had to. The basement wall started to smell. Not mold, not rot. It smelled like earth after a storm. Rich, dark, and wrong. I went down there one last time. I brought a flashlight, a screwdriver. I tapped along the wall, slowly, listening. When I reached the far left corner, I felt it. A vibration. Not like metal or a pipe. It was damp, like something shifting just beyond the concrete. Alive. Waiting. Listening. I didn't dig. I didn't have to. Whatever's back there doesn't need to be released. It just needed someone to hear it. And Liam did. I still visit him twice a month. He doesn't look at me, doesn't react. But I talk anyway. I tell him what the weather's like, who called, how mom's doing. And sometimes I swear he's listening. Not like a brother, like a transmitter. Like something that's still connected to what's coming. I don't have friends anymore. I don't go to movies. I don't listen to music. I sleep with a white noise machine. Every few nights, I wake up thinking it's whispering to me, too soft to make out. But steady enough that I know it's not in my head. Some days, I wonder if I should have dug through that wall. Other days, I think that's what it wanted all along.